The Right Reverend Bishop Gene Robinson was the first openly gay person to serve as a bishop in the Episcopal Church, and he brings a perspective to this story that few others can offer. Gene, I really wanted to talk with you on the air this week, and I thank you for juggling your schedule to make that possible. Our conversations on and off the air now span almost 2 decades. We've talked in good times and bad times, sometimes laughing, sometimes holding back tears, sometimes baffled, sometimes angry. But with you, and probably more with you than with me, in all of these times, you have been hopeful. Hopeful, actually. And this is one of the bad times and sad times. And we need your voice, your thoughts, your faith, and your vision. And I can't thank you enough for being with us. Welcome back to State of Belief.
Thanks so much, Welton. It's always a great pleasure to be with you, but especially at this really difficult time.
Gene, as tragic as the attack on the gay nightclub in Orlando was, has it been even more horrific because this happened during Pride Month? I know that's something you must have thought about.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So I was going to write a piece for the Daily Beast about Pride and to ask the question quite openly, do we need Pride Month? Do we need Pride Week or weekend or Pride Parade anymore? Have we long passed the time when that's really necessary? And so at our Pride Parade here in Washington, D.C. on Saturday, I asked the question of a wide range of people attending the parade, and I asked them what Pride meant to them. It was very interesting that the younger the person was that I asked, the more likely they were to say, "Oh, this is a party. This is a chance for us just to get together and be who we are, and isn't it great?" The older the person was that I asked, the more I heard a political message and also a more somber message, which is why is it that we don't seem to know our own history? Why is it that during the celebration of Pride, no one seems to remember the difficult journey it took, the dangerous journey it took to get where we are today? Mm-hmm. And they were sort of ruing the fact that our younger LGBT people just don't seem to be aware of or to remember or to honor the difficult road that has gotten us where we are. And then, of course, I wake up Sunday morning to this horrific news. And I wished that I could interview all of those same people on Sunday to see how their feelings about Pride changed from Saturday to Sunday. And my guess is that those who only saw Pride as a party were in a very much more somber place and understanding that this fight isn't over and the hatred against us has not ended, and that part of being resilient in the present is remembering our past.
Mm-hmm. Florida, far away, a gay bar, people different from me. I suspect these are things that a lot of people probably found themselves thinking, and I think it's vitally important to break through that detaching, distancing defense mechanism. Gene, you personally have survived death threats and worse, and I wonder if you would be willing to talk about what that was like and the lasting impact of encountering that kind of hate.
You know, I always call it incoming hate. You know, it's like missiles that get fired against you, and it causes you to be ever on the alert. And in some sense, it means that there is a constant tension in your life, right? That you don't take anything for granted, and you try to be ready for something awful coming your way, which oddly enough is why gay bars for the LGBT community have been places of refuge, right? I mean, we can't even go home to our parents usually. We are often rejected by them or thrown out of our what we used to call home, and so we over the last 50 years have sought out safe places where at least for a few moments you can let go of all that tension, that you can expect this to be a place where you don't have to worry about the incoming hate. And so there was a kind of desecration of that safe place in this Orlando shooting, and it's just such a vivid and horrifying reminder that our safe places are few and far between. And it's very easy for those of us who live in a very LGBT accepting and affirming bubble it's very easy to forget that that is not true all over the United States and certainly not true in the world. And so I think the thing that I take from this is that there is a threat even to those few safe spaces that we have where we can set aside that tension and just relax for a moment and take a deep breath and cherish the moment without worrying about those incoming missiles with hate warheads, if you please.
I guess, Gene, I want to pursue that a little further because I understand what you said about through the experiences with hate that you've had, you develop a caution or an alertness or the tension of always being on the lookout. How do you do that? And I ask you this because I see you doing it so well. How do you do that without letting alertness become paranoia?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I don't know how a person who is not a person of faith would answer this, but I can only answer it as a person of faith. And just as a sort of a near-death experience makes you think about your own mortality and contemplate the meaning of your life, it's also true that this kind of incoming hate, I think, at least for me, threw me back on my dependence on God. One of the reasons I love the Exodus story from the book of Exodus in the Hebrew Scriptures is that wandering for 40 years in the desert by the ancient Hebrew people, I think, was God's way of making sure that they remembered that they were, if they got to the Promised Land, it was because God wanted to take them there, not something that they have done on their own. And so what this kind of close encounter with danger for me did was it was a constant reminder that whatever good I was able to do or whatever good I seemed unable to do, it was God who would get me to a good and productive and positive and hopeful place. That without God, conjuring up hope seems to me like an impossible task. And with God, there is always hope. And on those days when I can't believe it myself, I put my belief in God, and through God, I can be somewhat hopeful because The world often gets it wrong. The church often gets it wrong, but God never gets it wrong. And with God, we can do astounding things. So for me, the experience of encountering that kind of hate immediately threw me back onto God, and I literally could not have done any part of what I've been able to do without God.
Gene, when you were in the middle of all of that, how clear was it to you that the anti-gay rhetoric that is so common in parts of our culture played a role in somehow making it okay to target people like you? But where does the permission for killing a person because of sexual orientation, where does that come from?
Well, I get that we have to be careful about drawing lines and asserting cause and effect, right? I mean, that's a very complicated and complex process. But I think we are kidding ourselves as religious people, especially if we are people of one of the three Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. We have built right into our sacred texts all the permission a shooter needs to mow down 50 people. It's right there in our text. And for instance, one of the things that I think is so disingenuous of the conservative religious right is that they are very happy to quote Leviticus to us about a man not lying with a man as with a woman. But they're smart enough to know not to say the next sentence that happens right after that verse in Leviticus, which is, they must be put to death. Yeah. Now, they don't say that because they know that people would be horrified by that. But that's what the next sentence says. And so for Jews and Christians, Leviticus has it, Islam has it, and someone wanting to commit this kind of a heinous hate crime, all they have to do is read their scriptures, and they find all of the permission they need, and then it gets those passions get fueled by the rhetoric that we hear from the religious right about how horrible, how disgusting, how despicable, and that LGBT people are. Every time there is a bathroom bill against transgender people, it's just another cue to people that we are expendable, that shooting us is probably a good thing in God's eyes, and you'll probably be rewarded for it. I think if we underestimate the power of our scriptures and our own rhetoric to encourage this kind of behavior, to create the space for it to happen, and to fuel the passions that are behind it, I think we are deluding ourselves. And it's long past time that we take responsibility for our scriptures and for our own rhetoric.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. There are serious conversations that have to happen to actually continue happening around gun control, around mental health issues, around radicalization. But do you see a connection between the ever-growing trend of dehumanizing the other, of making mortal enemies of people we disagree with, and this kind of deadly violence?
Absolutely. The only thing I would add is that it's nothing new. In fact, it's very, very old. We see this throughout history, where we come up with some sort of a rationale to dehumanize the other, and once that person is, or that group is dehumanized, then you can pretty much do anything to them that you want to. We don't have to look any further than the Holocaust for that, right? It began with the dehumanization of Jews and gypsies and homosexuals as well. And so, and once you dehumanize them, then death camps are actually pretty easy to think through and to implement. We incarcerated the Japanese and Japanese Americans in this country because we needed to dehumanize the Japanese because they were our enemy in World War II. We had been attacked, and so once we did that, the internment camps were easy to put together. And once you dehumanize gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgender people, and there are countless ways that happens, then, you know, if you're somewhat unstable, as this man, this shooter in Orlando seemed to be, it's really a very, very small step to wholesale slaughter.
Gene, doesn't that, in effect, make each and every one of us a target and therefore compels each and every one of us to do everything we can do to reverse this troubling trend?
Well, you'd think so, wouldn't you? I mean, at the end of the day, any of us can be dehumanized and targeted. But it does seem that throughout history, we have had the opportunity to focus on different groups at different times over the history of humankind. We happen to be at a place right now where I think that tends to be LGBT people and people of color. I mean, it is astounding to me that we can have so many reports on what happened in Orlando. We have so many people commenting on it. We have so many people in Congress addressing it without ever saying that it was a gay club, without ever saying LGBT, without ever saying that most of the people, almost all of the people in that club were people of color, and most of them were Hispanic. So there is something hideous about not naming the groups that have been dehumanized and then killed, and I see that as contributing to the hatred that led to this event. The not naming of the group that has been dehumanized further dehumanizes us.
Gosh, Gene, we're hearing again. Let's not politicize this tragedy. Tell us why that is so wrong to say.
Well, it is political. We don't get a choice about whether to politicize it or not. It just simply is political. It's political because of the gun laws or the lack of them in this country. It is political because the LGBT community is a political group as well as a social grouping. People of color are a political group, and so we simply cannot avoid the reality that our social life, our common life together as a society, is linked together and managed by politics. I mean, politics is nothing but the sort of the work of the people, right? And, you know, it's the kind of liturgy for the secular culture. And so to try to, I think when you hear people saying, oh, let's not politicize this, it means they don't like the political ramifications of an event like this. For instance, taking a look at the fact that you can't carry more than 3 ounces of shampoo onto a flight, but you can walk in and buy an assault rifle and use it without anybody ever even checking on you.
Yeah.
And that is insane, and that is political.
I realize we inevitably find ourselves walking the thin line between analysis and speculation, but you've spent a lifetime at the intersection of LGBT identity and organized religion. So if a man like the Orlando shooter finds himself in a struggle between questions about his own sexuality and relentless anti-gay messages, combined with mental instability. How likely do you think that goes a long way toward understanding what happened last Sunday morning?
This was perhaps the most surprising thing to me and to many of us in the LGBT community. The violence against us is nothing new. They've been killing us since time immemorial, for centuries, and they're still trying to kill us. So that part of it is not new. It was, yes, it was shocking, the sheer numbers and the sheer depth of it. But it's no surprise that the violence is done against us. We have lived with it forever. Mm-hmm. But when it was revealed that many people in this club knew this guy from his having been at this club many times over a series of years, there was just a gigantic thud in my heart when I heard that. Because the other thing that the gay community knows is that the first loathing you have to get over as a gay or lesbian, bisexual, or transgender person is the self-loathing that we have been taught to feel. I mean, we have learned from our religion all the things that everyone else has learned, which is that we are an abomination in God's eyes. And so we have had to go through the process of understanding that God loves us, God values us, and that God's love for us is beyond anything we can imagine. Mm-hmm. This man, if in fact he was in this club that often over that period of time, suggests at least, and perhaps we will never know, suggests that he himself was struggling with his own self-loathing. Mm-hmm. And what we in the LGBT community knows, or anyone who has a small amount of psychological knowledge, knows that what you do when there is something about yourself that you cannot embrace, that you want to run from, that the typical thing you do is you project it onto someone else and then you kill it. As a way of trying to kill it in yourself. And frankly, if that turns out to be true, I mean, I think his 911 call claiming allegiance to ISIS was literally trying to throw us off the trail from understanding that he himself was struggling with his own sexual identity, and he wanted to be remembered as a martyr and as a hero, not as a gay man who was so self-loathing that he killed and wounded 100 people who turn out to be in his own community. How blood-curdling is that? Mm-hmm. Mm.
Gene, we've seen and heard diverse reactions to this tragedy. I've been impressed by some of what we've seen from the international community and the ways they have identified with us in London and in Paris and other places. What have been your feelings as you've watched different reactions to the tragedy?
You know, it's hard to find the words to adequately express how much it means to us to have these expressions of sympathy and support. When you look at an event like this, there's kind of nothing you can say. Mm-hmm. But when people show up at a candlelight vigil, it says through their actions what people can't find the words to say, which is we stand with you. And I think I think what it means is that more and more people are realizing that the only way we really put a stop to this is not only to stand with the LGBT community, but to stand up for them. We will know that we are making progress when we stop laughing at gay jokes, when we stop believing the stereotypes, when we call people out on their anti-gay feeling. I mean, there was a time in the 60s in the great civil rights movement for African Americans that people actually stopped joining country clubs that wouldn't let Jews and blacks in.
Right.
And we need to get to that place in America that more and more people, a majority of people, are simply unwilling to participate in life with people who have that kind of hatred in their hearts. And this is all complicated, of course, for religious people because we do have these texts of terror that are used against us, and we have whole denominations of people who officially condemn us. And last night on TV, I'm watching a couple of independent church pastors saying what a good thing it was for 50 of us to be killed in Orlando, because after all, we're all pedophiles. It's just too bad that 100 or 200 or 500 weren't killed. Yeah. That's being actually said. Yeah. Over the airwaves and on YouTube and in countless places. And when are we going to stop pussyfooting around about this kind of hatred? As religious people, it seems to me that we follow a Savior who stood up against injustice and was willing to take the consequences.
Right. Gene, I don't want to be intrusive ever, and if you don't want to answer this, you certainly don't have to. The reason I'm asking it is because my experience over the last few days has been that a lot of people, both gay and straight, are having trouble knowing what their feelings are about this. And it occurred to me this morning that I'm interested in knowing what you will write in your journal or what you will say in your prayers or the notes that you will make to come back and look at it again when you reflect on what has happened so far this week.
I think the best advice I could give both my own community and the world right now is I think we need to be kind to ourselves, and we need to give ourselves time to understand what has happened to us and what it means. Mm-hmm. We live in a 24-hour news cycle, and people want answers right now. It's going to take a while to absorb the enormity of this and the meaning of it. It's going to take a while to figure out what was happening and why, and how religion is a part of it, and how our commitment to the common good is missing. And I mean, there are just all kinds of avenues to follow. And so, I think what I'm trying to do for myself, and what I think would be good advice for anyone else, is take your time and resist the deep desire to have all this anxiety go away. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we avoid the anxiety by rushing to a conclusion, or rushing to an opinion, or rushing to an explanation. Because once we've explained it, then we don't have to think about it anymore. Hmm. And what we need to do is to think about this a lot. And so I expect to feel differently about all this tomorrow, and even more differently the next day and the next day and the next. This is going to take a while. And as a culture, we cannot let this go with today's news cycle. We have to sit with it and think about it and pray about it for a good while before we're going to be able to get our arms and our hearts and our minds around it. But I think that is the only way we're actually going to benefit from this experience and do what God is always capable of doing, which is bringing something very, very good out of something very, very awful. That is the story of the crucifixion and the resurrection, that God can always bring something good out of something terrible.
Gene, are there any final thoughts you want to share that I haven't got to by asking you the right question or pushing you in a direction? Are we leaving out anything you want to say?
Your questions have been great, and like I say, I think maybe tomorrow, different questions, different answers, but for today, I think what I would end by saying is don't underestimate the importance and the power of your standing with us in this terrible time. I, for one, just feel on the edge. I am teary half of the day. It takes almost nothing to start me crying again. Mm-hmm. And so seeing and hearing people standing with us, not worrying about the saying the right thing, just standing with us mm-hmm. in this terrible time, saying the words gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgender, saying gay bar, saying people of color, saying Latino and Latina, it means you're standing with us in this hour of need. And I cannot say strongly enough how important that is and how much it means to us.
Well, I can't tell you how important it was to talk with you, and as always, the thoughts that you share that will get a lot of other people thinking, and I hope some challenges as well. Gene, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. This one seems very special, and I thank you for being with us on State of Belief.
Well, and thank you. See, I'm tearing up. Thank you for standing with us for all these years.
Talk to you soon, brother. Thank you.
Thank you.